The locksmith finished changing the deadbolt on my own front door at 6:14 in the morning, and I paid him in cash so there'd be no record my daughter-in-law could find. 3 hours later, she was on that porch screaming my name through the glass, and I sat in my recliner with a cup of coffee and watched her like she was a stranger. Because by then she was. If you've ever handed your whole life to people who smiled at you while they were emptying your pockets, stay with me, because what they did to me was uglier than you're imagining, and what I did back was worse. Hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name doesn't matter much anymore, but folks around Asheville knew me for 40 years as the man who built half the brick storefronts on Lexington Avenue with my own 2 hands. I'm 68. I poured my first foundation when I was 19, and I never took a dime I didn't earn. I buried my wife 6 years ago. Ovarian cancer took her in 11 months, and I held her hand the whole way down. After that, all I had left in this world was my boy and the construction company I'd spent my life building from a single pickup truck and a wheelbarrow. I want you to understand something about how I was before all this. I was soft. Not weak, but soft. I gave my son everything. When he wanted to go to a fancy business school back east instead of learning the trade, I wrote the check and never blinked. When he came home with a wife I didn't trust, I kept my mouth shut and walked her down to the company picnic and introduced her to everyone like she was already family. I told myself a father's job is to open his hands, not close them. I believed that right up until the morning I found out it was costing me my life. It started small, the way these things always do. About a year ago, I noticed I was getting tired in a way that didn't make sense. I'd run heavy equipment all day at 60 without breaking a sweat. But suddenly, I couldn't get up the stairs in my own house without stopping halfway to catch my breath. My doctor put me on a blood pressure medication and a heart pill, told me to slow down, said my numbers were strange but not alarming yet. My daughter-in-law took it upon herself to manage my pills. She bought one of those plastic organizers with the little doors for each day of the week, and every Sunday she'd come over and fill it, fussing the whole time about how I'd never remember on my own. How lucky I was to have someone looking after me. I let her. God help me. I was grateful for it. I thought it was love. My son had been pushing for 2 years to take over the company. I understood that, even respected it. A man wants to step into his own. So I'd been slowly handing him the reins, letting him sit in on the bids, the bank meetings, the contracts. What I didn't know was that he and his wife had already drawn up papers with a lawyer, power of attorney over my finances, medical proxy. They had me signing things I thought were ordinary business documents, and I signed them because I trusted my own blood. I'm telling you this so you understand how it happens. It doesn't happen to fools. It happens to people who love too easily. The night everything changed, I'd gone to bed early. My chest had been tight all day, a dull pressure that wouldn't quit. Around 11, I woke up parched, the kind of dry mouth that comes with the pills, and I went downstairs for water. My son and his wife were staying over that week because they'd been helping me get the books in order before a big quarterly meeting. Their car was in the drive. I figured they were asleep in the guest room. But the light was on in my study. The door was cracked, and I heard their voices low and quick, the way people talk when they don't want to be heard. I should have just gone back to bed. I almost did, but something in my daughter-in-law's tone stopped me on the bottom stair. She was laughing, but it wasn't a nice laugh. "He's getting suspicious about the tower deal," my son said. "He keeps asking why the numbers don't match." "Then stop letting him see the numbers," she said. "How hard is that? He signs whatever you put in front of him. He's half asleep most of the day from the pills anyway." I stood there in the dark hallway in my undershirt, holding an empty glass, and I felt the floor tilt under me. "The doctor said his heart's not strong," my son said, and there was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Not worry. Calculation. If we just leave it the way it is, nature takes its course. We don't have to do anything. The medication interaction is doing it for us. My daughter-in-law's voice came back soft and patient. like she was explaining something to a child. I already moved him to the double dose. He thinks the doctor changed it. His blood pressure's bottoming out. Another month or two of this and his heart just stops in his sleep. Clean. No autopsy questions on a 68-year-old man with a known heart condition. She paused. We just have to keep him calm and signing until the Westgate deal closes. That's $9 million. After that, it doesn't matter what he figures out because he won't be around to do anything about it. I want to tell you that I burst through that door. I want to tell you I roared. But the truth is I couldn't move. My legs had gone to water, and my heart was slamming so hard. I thought maybe they were right. Maybe it would just stop right there on the staircase and they'd find me in the morning, and the whole thing would be wrapped up neat. The pills, the double dose, she'd been killing me, one little plastic door at a time, every Sunday, smiling, while I thanked her for it. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough to hear my son say, "What about the will?" Long enough to hear his wife answer, "Already handled. The new one names you sole executor. The old man signed it in that stack last Tuesday. He didn't even read it." Long enough to hear them both laugh, easy and warm. Two people who loved each other planning my funeral over a glass of my own bourbon. I made it back up the stairs without a sound. 40 years of walking quiet on job sites where one wrong step means a fall. And it served me that night. I lay in my bed in the dark with my heart trying to climb out through my ribs. And I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I did nothing. I waited for morning. Now here's where most men would have gone to the police. I thought about it. I lay there and I planned it out, how I'd drive to the sheriff's office and tell them everything. And then I thought it through. The way I think through a build, foundation up, and I saw the problem. What did I have? An old man's word against his own son and a daughter-in-law everybody loved. The pills in that organizer were the right pills, just doubled, and she filled them. There was no recording. The will was signed in my hand. To anyone looking from the outside, I was a confused, sick old man with a grudge against the children who were caring for him. I'd seen exactly that story play out in my own family 40 years back. An uncle who cried elder abuse and got nothing but a reputation as a paranoid drunk. No, if I came at them straight, I lost. They'd already built the case for my own madness. I had to do something they'd never see coming. So the next morning, I came downstairs and I played dead. Not literally. I mean, I played the part they'd written for me. The fading old man. I let my hand shake a little when I lifted my coffee. I asked my son the same question twice and let him correct me with that patient, pitying smile. I told my daughter-in-law I didn't know what I'd do without her, and I watched something flicker behind her eyes, satisfaction, and I memorized it so I'd never forget what I was dealing with. And then I started the quietest war of my life. The first thing I did was stop taking the pills. Not all of them. I kept up the blood pressure one because I knew I needed it. But the heart medication, the one she'd doubled, I started palming. Every morning she'd hand me the little cup of water and stand there watching. So I learned to tuck the pill under my tongue, swallow the water, and spit it into a tissue the second she turned around. I saved every single one of them in an old prescription bottle taped to the underside of a workbench drawer out in my garage. The one place that woman never set foot because she said it smelled like motor oil. Within 2 weeks, I had proof, in pill form, of exactly how many doses she'd given me, and I'd started feeling stronger. The fog lifted. The stairs got easier. My heart settled. That alone told me everything I needed to know about what they'd been doing to me. The second thing I did was find a lawyer. Not my company lawyer, the one my son met with. A woman in Charlotte, 2 hours away, that nobody connected to my family had ever heard of. I drove out there on a Tuesday, told my son I was going to a doctor's appointment, and I sat in her office and laid the whole thing out. She listened without interrupting. And when I finished, she told me the will and the power of attorney could be challenged. but it would be ugly and slow, and I'd need overwhelming evidence of fraud and undue influence. Overwhelming. That word stuck with me. So I set about gathering an avalanche. I bought a small recorder, the kind that fits in a shirt pocket, and I started wearing it. Every conversation, every business meeting where my son slid papers in front of me, I'd ask innocent questions, the questions a confused old man would ask, and I'd let them explain to me in their own words exactly what they were taking. Don't worry about the Westgate figures, Dad. I've got it handled. We move the operating account. It's just easier for tax reasons. Every word recorded. I started photographing documents before I signed them, then signing my real signature only on the harmless ones, and a slightly different signature on the ones that mattered. A deliberate flaw a handwriting expert could catch later. Small things, the kind of things a man builds slow when he's got time and they think he's already dying. But the medication, that was the heart of it. I needed to prove she was poisoning me on purpose, not just making a mistake. So I went back to my own doctor, alone, and I told him the truth. All of it. I watched his face go gray. He was a good man. He'd known me 20 years, and he was sick that he hadn't caught it. He pulled my records and showed me the prescription history. The dosage had never been changed. He'd never authorized a double dose. She'd been doing it entirely on her own, and there it was in black and white in his own files. He ran new blood work, and the numbers told the story plain as a blueprint. The damage that medication had done to a heart that, it turned out, had never been as weak as they'd led me to believe. The fatigue, the breathlessness, the fog, all of it had been the poison, not my age. My doctor wrote it all up, signed it, dated it, and put a copy in a sealed envelope for my lawyer. I had them. But I didn't move yet. Because I'm a builder, and you don't show a house before the foundation's cured. I wanted it all to land at once, in a way they could never wriggle out of, in a way the whole world would see. And the Westgate deal gave me my chance. The Westgate development was the biggest project my company had ever taken on, a $9 million mixed-use build downtown, and the signing ceremony was set for the end of the month at the bank, with the developers, the city council members, the press, everyone. My son was going to stand up in front of all of them and sign as the new head of the company, the heir, the bright young man taking the reins from his fading father. He'd practically written my eulogy already. He'd booked a photographer. So I let him think it was happening. I smiled and nodded and let him plan his big day. And the whole time, I was building mine. 3 days before the signing, I did something that must have terrified them when they figured it out, though by then it was far too late. I went to the bank, alone. On a morning I told them I was resting, and I sat down with a manager I'd known for 30 years. I showed him the recordings. I showed him my doctor's letter. I showed him the photographed documents with the forged-looking variations, and I quietly froze every account, moved the company's operating capital into a new entity that only I controlled, and put a legal hold on the Westgate signing pending what I described to him as a family matter that's become a legal one. He didn't ask many questions. He'd lend me money when I had nothing but a truck. He trusted me. He made it happen. The night before the signing, my son was so happy I almost felt something. Almost. He had 2 glasses of wine at dinner and talked about all the changes he was going to make. The office he was going to remodel. My office. My daughter-in-law kept refilling my water glass and reminding me to take my evening pills. I took the water. I palmed the pill. I told them both I was proud of them. I told them tomorrow was going to be a day none of us would ever forget. And I meant every word. The signing was held in the grand conference room at the bank, the one with the long mahogany table and the windows looking out over the mountains. There were maybe 40 people there, the developers and their attorneys, 3 city council members, a reporter and photographer from the local paper, the bank's executives, and my son, in a suit I didn't recognize that probably cost more than my first house, sitting at the head of the table where I used to sit, with his wife beside him in pearls, both of them glowing. They'd set a chair for me off to the side. the retired patriarch. The prop, somebody to be thanked in the speech, and photographed looking proud, and then wheeled off to die. My son stood up and gave a little speech about legacy and the future, and how grateful he was to carry on what his father had started. He looked over at me and his eyes were wet, and I'll tell you the truth. That's the part that still keeps me up at night, because I think he half believed it himself. People can love you and rob you at the same time. They can grieve a man they're killing. I learned that the hard way. When he finished and the attorneys slid the contracts down the table toward him, I stood up. I didn't shuffle. I didn't shuffle. I straightened my spine the way I used to when a foreman tried to cut corners on my site. And I walked to the head of the table where my son sat. And the room went quiet because something in the way I moved didn't match the man they thought I was. Before anybody signs anything, I said, and my voice carried to the back of that room clear and strong, there's a few things these good people ought to know. My son started to say something, started to laugh it off. Dad, what are you? But I set a folder down on the table in front of all of them and opened it. I laid it out one piece at a time. The doctor's letter, certified, stating that no double dose had ever been prescribed and that my blood work showed deliberate, sustained over-medication. The prescription bottle full of the pills I'd palmed for 2 months, each one she'd handed me with a smile. Then I set down a small speaker, and I pressed play. And into that silent room full of bankers and council members and reporters came my daughter-in-law's voice, clear as a bell, explaining how his heart just stops in his sleep. Clean. No autopsy questions on a 68-year-old man. I have built a lot of things in my life. I have never built a silence like the one in that room. The reporter was writing so fast I thought her pen would catch fire. One of the city council members put her hand over her mouth. My son had gone the color of wet cement, and his wife, that calm, patient woman who'd filled my pill organizer 52 Sundays in a row, stood up so fast her chair went over backward, and she started to talk, fast and shrill. And every word she said dug the hole deeper, because there's no clean way to talk your way out of your own voice describing how you plan to kill a man. I told them about the will I'd signed without reading. I told them I'd already rewritten it, with my lawyer in Charlotte, witnessed and notarized and locked away. I told them the accounts were frozen, the company restructured, the Westgate deal on hold under my sole authority, because I was the only person in that room with the legal right to authorize it, and I never had and never would hand it to a man who was waiting for me to die. My son finally found his voice, and what came out was an anger. It was the small, cracked voice of a little boy. "Dad," he said. "Dad, please." And here's the thing I want you to understand. The thing I sat with for a long time afterward. I could have shown mercy. He was my blood. Some part of me wanted to gather him up the way I did when he was small and skinned his knee. But then I remembered the laughing. I remembered the easy warmth in their voices as they planned my funeral. I remembered that he booked a photographer for the day he expected to bury his father's company. And I remembered that not once in all those months, in all that calculation, had either of them flinched. Mercy is something you give to someone who made a mistake. What they did wasn't a mistake. It was a plan, executed slowly, lovingly, over a year, with my own gratitude greasing the wheels. So I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I'd given everything, and I said the only thing I had left to say. I gave you my whole life. You decided that wasn't worth as much as my death, so now you get nothing, and you get to live a long time with that. I gathered my folder. The detectives the bank manager had quietly called were already in the lobby. I didn't watch them take my son and his wife. I'd seen enough of both their faces to last me the rest of my days. It's been a year and a half now. The trial made the papers across 3 states. My son took a plea, 8 years. My daughter-in-law fought it and got 14 because it was her voice on that recording, her hands on those pills, and a jury doesn't have much sympathy for a woman who poisons the man who paid for her wedding. The company is still mine, stronger than ever, Matter of fact, the Westgate Towers are halfway up now. I drive past them most evenings and I watch the cranes against the sunset and I feel my heart, my good strong heart that was never as weak as they wanted me to believe, beating steady in my chest. People ask me if I miss him. The honest answer is that I miss the son I thought I had, the one who never existed, the way you miss a house you only ever saw in a drawing. The real one I see twice a year through glass with a phone pressed to my ear, and we don't have much to say. I'll leave you with what I'd tell any man my age who thinks the people smiling at him couldn't possibly mean him harm. Don't ever mistake your own kindness for safety. Don't hand over the keys just because somebody shares your blood and your name. And if you ever find yourself standing in a dark hallway listening to the people you love plan the end of you, don't roar, don't cry. Go quiet, go cold, and build your answers slow and solid, because the man who keeps his head is the man who keeps his head is the man left standing when the dust clears. I built my whole life with my hands, and in the end, I used them to dig 2 graves. Not mine. I'm still here, and I am not going anywhere.